There you go. Hey, how are you? How are
I'm
you
all right.
doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Surviving. It's like
Yeah,
shitty weather and it's freezing cold over here, so it's not
we're
great.
almost neighbors, right? So
Yeah, I guess. There's
it's the same. Yeah.
the art on the wall behind you, school.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's Anthony Lister, and
Hmm.
it's I mean, we should have preserved it better. It's Helmut Newton. It's actually it wasn't supposed to be yellow, but it was in the sun for a long time. So,
Yeah, happens, doesn't it? They look really cool.
and I don't know what's on the background of your.
And mine. So I interviewed Stuart McAlpine Miller earlier, and
Ah,
that's
okay. Yeah,
that's one of his. And then I've got Blood Art there next to me as well, because that's my favorite that we own. Well, yeah, I love
nice.
that piece.
How was
But
the
yeah,
Hamilton exhibition?
it went really well. Yeah, I mean, I got what I wanted out of it, which was to just get people to know about Hambleton, really, because like he
Yeah,
was one of the first street artists, and no one knows him at all. So yeah, a lot of people were surprised that they'd never heard of him. So yeah, no, yeah, it went really well.
I mean, yeah, that's a shame, but
Yeah,
then it's up to other people to educate people about it, right? I
yeah, that
do
was
think
my aim.
it's a very interesting concept with the shadow figures and very eerie and still relevant till this time.
I think so too, because he worked just off of provoking people's emotional responses. That's what the majority of his pieces are. And I
Yeah,
just feel like he used to talk about how that was the real art. The real art was how the person perceives it. And if the person perceives it as something that's real and something that's happening, then that's true art to him.
yeah,
But it was the complete opposite of the other people in his time as well. So that's
yeah.
part of
That's
it.
definitely true. But
Yeah, no,
I guess. Oh,
mhm.
sorry.
No, it's okay. You go.
No, I guess that's why I always took an interest in him because it was different than what people were painting back in that time as well.
I
Of course,
agree.
it was very much more graffiti related and Basquiat related than these shadow figures that are. I mean, it's hard to explain to people when they've never seen it, but it's yeah, what I said before, it's very eerie and it just has a certain vibe to it that is exciting, you know?
Yeah, I set up this whole room so it's like different parts of his life was basically the concept, so people could see the way that he developed. And yeah, I just think that harnessing emotion from people, I think it's really easy, especially nowadays in modern age, you're constantly bombarded with new art.
Yeah,
Whereas back then it wasn't something that happened. So walking out and seeing street art back then, like it was a hard concept to even gauge that someone had done that just for the sake of art rather than it being something that was real.
yeah, it's funny how the movement has developed over the years because nowadays it's I, I sometimes miss that magic, you know, of finding street art in places that I wasn't expecting it, and it's not a large scale mural or anything, you know. It's
It must have developed a lot, like during your time being a street artist so far, then already, just with the digital age.
Yeah, I mean, I slightly began before the whole Exit Through the Gift Shop documentary became a thing.
Yeah.
And I guess that is certainly one of those turning points in the later years for street art where um, I think the movement benefited from, and at the same time, the essence of street art has also changed.
Yeah, a lot of the street artists I work with have been, I don't know, they're in their 40s, 50s now, and they often say about how they feel that it's just so overrun with everyone wanting to tag things constantly over their stuff that it's just layer upon layer of people fighting for the same wars,
Yeah,
which I can
it's the
imagine
same.
It's hard though, right? Isn't it? Especially if you put loads of like time and effort into something. I think the disposability of street art is something hard that's difficult to deal with.
Uh, I mean, sometimes it's annoying when these kids are tagging your piece and it's only up for 1 week, you know? But at the same time, I do think that when I got into creating art on the street, it was always expected not to last forever. And with that in mind, it doesn't really bother me that much. I do sometimes get like a DM from a street art spotter or anything that asks me if this is actually fully my work or that people tagged on it, because they don't always see the difference because I'm always adding sketchy stuff to it. But yeah, I mean that's the beauty of it, right? It's
Yeah.
also the beauty of life. One day you'll be gone and forgotten, just like the art.
Beautiful. Yeah, is that part of I think most street artists now also then start making canvas pieces. Was that part of the reason that you wanted to go into making canvases and having things in the gallery so that people can actually have your pieces and honor them?
No, it's actually a very silly story in that sense that I never wanted to become an artist necessarily. I was doing it more in terms of a therapy form than thinking about making this my job. But then, as a high school dropout without any work, I was able to sell some pieces, and it felt like a nice thing to do, you know, to paint and actually get money for it. Um, and it was more of just surviving back then than thinking it's going to be a career. But now, 15 years later, I can call it a career, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. What was your childhood like? Because I feel like your pieces are so emotion driven. I was kind of curious to kind of what your whole sort of backstory is.
Um, my, it's a bit complicated. I don't mind telling about it because I'm very open about it. But I kind of grew up around when I was 12. I was transferred to a youth psychiatric facility where it's basically a lot of kids away from home with either depression or problems with aggression or anorexia and that kind of stuff. So it was a very different climate how I grew up in, and it was kind of like prison, but maybe a bit weird in that sense. So a lot of the emotion and stories and I guess anger and sadness, but also joy are fueled by that period. Now, like back then, people didn't know how life within those walls was, but now I think since last year or 2 years ago, like all the stories came out of sexual abuse, fighting, you name it, you know. So it was a very hostile environment uh, where I partly grew up in. I'm not going to say my whole life was this terrible, terrible environment, but it definitely formed me in those years that you're trying to explore the world.
Were you while you were there, were you able to do art? Were you able to channel it into something?
At first, not at first, because I mean, I always liked creating stuff. I always was writing and drawing and that kind of stuff, but I never really looked at it when I was like a 13-year-old as okay, this is a form of therapy or anything. And then I guess when I was getting older as a teenager, um, it started to give me a lot of uh, confidence to deal with my problems and feel less anxious about it. and I do think that that really helped in me becoming a better person in general.
When did you start doing street art? How old were you?
Um, I think around 16 that I was actually calling it maybe graffiti or street art, but I've always drawn
Mhm.
text and tags and stuff on walls because it just felt like nature to me.
Yeah, that's what I
But
was going to ask
around
was why
16.
did you start doing it? Yeah, I was going to, the transition from paper to walls seems like a brave one, in my opinion.
I mean, it's always exciting when people say you're not allowed to do certain stuff. You know, you automatically kind of get attracted to it, and
Yeah.
this was the same, I guess. And back then I was a shitty kid, to be honest. So I was very when I came out of that facility, I was back into my old school and not really had a proper vision on the future, you know. So it was like, okay, whatever. I'll just do whatever I want.
Have you had any like people tell you before that no, you can't do this, or have you had runs in with the law doing it?
Um, I had a couple of run-ins with the law when I was doing an installation on the street, which uh, I mean, it's not fully legal to do it, but it was also not that big of deal where they said this is a criminal offense. It's just more of, okay, just clean up your stuff and don't paint
Yeah.
directly on the walls. And I think maybe my biggest hater, who is also my biggest supporter, is my father because he absolutely hates it when I'm destroying property of people that didn't ask for it. So
Yeah, I've had other street artists say the same thing about like when they were a kid being dropped home by the police and their
yeah.
parents just being like, "What are you doing?" But it seems I'm so interested and inspired by it because it seems like such a bravery to me. Do you feel like there's a need to put art in such a public place for
Uh,
yourself as like for people to see it? I feel like it's hard for people sometimes like to have their art at home and no one to ever see it, but you just get natural visibility.
I mean, I do believe that have this need to put it on the streets. And also, I mean, there's a big difference with painting on legal walls or like spots that are more of a hall of fame than in areas where it shouldn't be expected. Um, and I do think that that's my motivation because I enjoy it and I hope other people enjoy it as well. And at the same time, when I walk on the streets and I see all these big advertisements that I didn't ask for,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
where's my space in this place, you know?
Hmm. Which artists or movements are the most inspiring to you and have had an influence on your journey?
Um, in terms of street art, I am a big fan of Swoon and Hush.
Me
I
too.
I I think those two artists are amazing, but also, for example, with Swoon, the whole environmental stuff that she's doing, but also involving the people from the neighborhood, and it's more how I would vision street art. It has a purpose besides being pretty. It's also helpful for the community. I do like a lot of old Russian abstract painters like uh, Kandinsky and Malevich, for example. That when you go back in history, they were actually doing large scale murals as well. But back then, it was more of a, I guess, a propaganda thing than
Yeah.
how we would see it now. And I think there's a lot of inspiring stuff, even now with the newer generations, because we always tend to look back on what is inspiring, but I do think that when we see the new generation and how they implement their style or culture or the way that they're creating, I guess, quote unquote content, it can be very inspiring. But you have to dig a bit deeper, I guess.
How has your Dutch heritage and your cultural background played a role in your art?
Uh, that's that's a nice question, actually. It's very difficult, and I talk a lot because usually when I go to concerts in Amsterdam, I'll miss my train and I'll have to get a taxi back. And 9 out of 10 times, the cab drivers are from a migrant background as well,
Mm.
and we always have similar stories where we don't fit in. Like in the Netherlands, I was more the foreign kid, I guess, and we would, especially when you grow up in a small village, people would say go back to your own country. But then when you go to those countries where your family is, they see you as a tourist and more of a the rich Dutch person. So you never really fit in, um, which I guess it gives you a different perspective on a lot of stuff, and it also gives you the time and space to think for yourself and how you feel about certain subjects. And it also makes you very uh, very much a lone wolf in that sense, you know. And
Yeah.
there are positive sides to that and negative sides. I mean, I do love that I'm capable to move freely and do whatever I want, but at the same time, it's very lonely because you don't have that much to share with other people.
Yeah, it kind of in a way it kind of sounds like you have no one else on, or I kind of understand in a way because I'm from like a really tiny country town that I I had a kid really young, and then basically it was like everyone was like, oh, you don't, no one gets out of here, you know,
Yeah,
but you feel like you don't fit in there. And then I moved away, went to the city, and now it's like I never really felt like I have a home, if that makes
no,
sense.
no, no, exactly. Totally understandable feeling.
Mm.
Yeah, but same small village town where there's already a career plan set. You're either going to be this or you're going to work in the farming industry, for example. And um I do have to say, the older I get, the more I'm falling in love with that environment again, because I
Mm.
do think that um, a lot of the decision making in the Netherlands, for example, is pretty based around these big cities that are very much used to all these different influences, different cultures, and um, sometimes they also forget that there's this other part of the country which is a lot bigger that actually has a different lifestyle or different views. And um, I'm not saying I'm agreeing with all the views, but I do understand where people are coming from.
So your first, was it your first exhibition that was called Pain and Pleasure? Was it your first?
Um, it was the first one for the Go Gallery. Yeah,
Mhm.
between pain and
What was
pleasure.
that like?
It was very nerve-wracking, to be honest,
I can
because
imagine.
I did have certain solo exhibitions in Amsterdam back then, but it kind of felt like this was a new step in my career, or like more of a. I mean, back then, Go Gallery, they won like Street Art Gallery of the Year for a couple of times for the Dutch Street Art Awards. So it kind of felt like there was kind of a pressure. And the exhibition went well. I mean, we sold 10 of the 14 pieces on opening night, which was a pretty
It's
big
amazing.
accomplishment. But that also gave me a lot of stress for the future, because then you kind of feel like, okay, next time I'll have to sell 11 or 12, or I
Yeah.
can't do less. But the reality is, it's not always like that. You don't always sell 10 paintings. I
What was
mean,
that exhibition about? Like, I know it was called Pain and Pleasure. Specifically, what was the conceptually?
uh, I, it was more an exhibition back then about, I guess, the struggle that I had, where, given my background, it was very hard to have a positive outlook on life, and at the same time, you have to, in order to continue life and move on, because you can't be stuck in that position forever. And it was more of an internal struggle with, do I want to keep that sadness? Because in a way, when you're dealing with a lot of that stuff, it also becomes a bit of a safe environment, even though it's negative. Like, if you're always used to
Yeah.
um,
Ends up
staying
being a
inside.
comfort, weirdly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was more of a struggle. And then, I mean, I don't know how people reacted to it, if they felt that I represented it well, but um, for me, it was at least cathartic in that sense.
Many street artists use their work as a form of social commentary. Are there specific recurring themes or messages that you try and get across in your art?
Um, yeah, I do think that one of the main messages from my point of view is that it's still a lot about mental health, in a sense. It's still a lot about focalizing the story of life, and that life cannot always be perfect, and that should be okay. You should also embrace the negative aspects in that sense, or your own negative traits. I do think that we shouldn't strive for perfection, but for a complete life, and that part is necessary to fulfill it till completion. Um, I I used to be more political, but I just don't know if I'm the right person to be upset about it. It's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, especially with the American election that just happened.
I mean, to be honest, I guess the Americans, they had to pick between lesser of the two evils, and um, I do a lot of work in the U.S., and honestly, the only time it was easy for me to enter the country was when Trump was president. So I'm kind of looking forward to that presidency again. No, just kidding. No, I don't know. I mean, now, even I don't know if you heard the news about Amsterdam and what happened in the past 48 hours.
No, I haven't.
We had a football match between the club from Amsterdam, Ajax, and Maccabi Tel Aviv from Israel, and a lot of crazy stuff happened yesterday, and we definitely reached a new low as a society, from both sides, to be honest. Um, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm the right person to comment about it, and I also don't want to comment about it, because I just think there are too many dumb people all
Yeah.
over the political spectrum, and I just don't want to deal
Yeah.
with those people.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard because you want to have your own opinion and form your own beliefs, but at the same time, when everyone has one, it can be overwhelming, to say the
Yeah,
least.
it is, and like, from some of my friends, I do understand the type of art they're making, given their background. Um, but I also see this, I guess, wave of people that never were outspoken about anything in their life, and all of a sudden they do the
Yeah.
3-layer stencil that is referencing certain wars, and then I'm like, really?
Do you think people do it on purpose just to try and get attention specifically?
100%.
Yeah.
I used to work for Katawiki, which is an auction platform, not only in the Netherlands, in Europe and America. And I remember back then I was the category lead for the primary market. So basically, all the art experts that were working directly with artists, they were under uh, my supervision, I guess. And I remembered when the whole thing with George Floyd happened, which was terrible. I think each week we received 200 to 300 submissions from artists that would never paint anything politically, and it
Hmm.
was just a cash grab. And
Yeah.
I do think when people are using it to promote their business or whatever the hell they're doing, um,
Hmm.
I think if you're not sincere, then you shouldn't make it, you know?
It's hard to tell sometimes, isn't it? I think technically the word's called selling out, really, isn't it? Is when you compromise your morals just to put out an opinion just because it's popular at the time. Yeah, I'm expecting to
Yeah.
see a lot of Trump things. Is what I'm expecting.
Uh, I do too, and I guess, just because it would be Trump as a subject matter, for example, there could still be great pieces of art about
Yeah.
Trump. It's just that um, there's also just a big portion that's falling into these phrases and imagery that we've seen so many years already. Like we, I know we get the starving kid with the "I want change," and we get the kid with the balaclava and the spray can that's fighting for peace, but essentially you're just showing, hey, look at me, I'm involved with the
Yeah.
world by my stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's something I like so much about your art though is you can tell how authentic it is. You can tell how much you care about I mean you've donated to charities and you support loads of great causes and I assume you specifically pick the causes as well because they're things that really do resonate with you.
Yeah, I do try to pick causes that are in my direct environment because my friend Doug Loinick, I met him in Peoria, Illinois, and he taught me about his philosophy, which was called backyardism, where he said that you cannot change the whole world, but you can change what happens in your backyard. And um, I do believe that that is my responsibility, and that's everyone's responsibility. Like I cannot solve the world issues as much as I would like to, and but I can change maybe what people are doing in my own street or neighborhood or how they perceive things. Um, it's also a bit tricky though because sometimes you support causes or you support people, and then in 10 years there's a whole different story
Different
going on.
story.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I tend to I mean I am proud. I do share my works and my projects in that sense, but I'm not plastering it all on the internet. But it's also because I do believe like you have to do the change even if there's no one watching, you know? It's not like, okay, I'm gonna film feeding this homeless person or gonna do this.
Yeah.
It's but
Yeah, you're not doing it for the attention, you're doing it because you genuinely care. And that's amazing. I was going to ask specifically on your in your work, you often add like a color underneath the strip of the eyes. Is
yeah.
there a specific reason you do it?
Um I always had an interest for like people their the gaze of eyes, like uh because sometimes when you cannot communicate with people, whether they're too far away or you don't speak the language, like a lot you can tell from people their eyes. I'm very bad with eye contact, so it's also kind of ironic that I wanted to paint a lot with eyes. Um, and by giving it a color, it just emphasizes it basically on, okay, this is the part where you have to look at. Um, but then I also heard people say that it had to do with Arab countries and Islam, and I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
oh,
if
did
this
she?
is, I mean, everyone is up, to interpret stuff how they want, and I do think that in order for the art to become fun, um, the artist should keep their mouth shut and have people draw their own conclusions as well. Because I shouldn't be the one dictating how people look at stuff. You know, it's not. It's my job to create stuff, and I'm not going to explain it necessarily unless people ask me. Um, but that always kind of stuck, and then I mean, I'm trying to get away from it because it's also from an artist point of view very boring to do the same thing over and over again. But it's definitely what makes my work more my work, I guess, instead of
Mhm.
a very realistic image.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know. It's
interesting.
very hard to talk about your own work.
No, no, I know. I'd assumed it was like a mask. Like, like you get those little strip
Yeah.
masks. I'd seen it as like a mask. That's what
I
my
mean,
opinion of it was.
I do like masks a lot. So, I mean, I'm happy when people say that they see that in that as well. It's
What is the creative process like for you? Like, how do you go from conceptualizing to then getting it painted?
um how to get from start to finish, you mean? Or
Yeah.
uh it's sometimes you'll have like weeks upon weeks where everything you create just sucks, and then you have to find your inspiration from somewhere. And I do like to watch documentaries about um, people that aren't necessarily in my field. So I like Chef's Table, for example. And I remember one of the episodes was about a baker who used to bake a lot of stuff from her childhood. And that gave me, for example, the inspiration to delve into my own childhood and then figure out, okay, what kind of stories do I want to show? And I'll make a, I'm like a housewife. I'll make a Pinterest board, and
I
I'll
love
make
that.
collages and
I
I'll
love
mix
like
and
a mood
match.
board. Yeah.
Yeah,
Make a mood
yeah.
board. That's
And
cool.
I mean, it's fun. And I guess with now with the technology you have, you can also change it really fast. Like, okay, what about this color, instead of painting it first and then waiting to dry and not feeling happy about it. But it's a lot of collage work, which is the foundation for it. And then as time progresses and the actual piece is getting made, um, I'll adjust here and there where I think it's more exciting to do so, or do something different. So it's like a little bit of control still in my hands, but also just a spur of the moment.
That's cool. What do you have a studio space of your own to paint in? Where do you paint?
I used to have a studio space, but I bought this house 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Back then, I didn't. I hadn't met my wife yet, and also I had the whole house for myself and built a studio there. Now we have a separate studio where we're doing work together, and we're gonna rebuild the studio here at home. So
That's cool.
it's nice, to wake up and to get straight to work if you want to, but it's also, I mean, you're always stuck in the house, so you kind of want to mix between the studios. But we can't complain. We have enough space.
Are you a tidy artist though, or are you a messy artist?
I so I'm a neat freak, believe it or not. I'm very much
Okay.
so that I have spreadsheets filled with all my paints and amounts and stuff that I know are in the house somewhere.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I'll have this creative phase, and then it just looks like a war zone. So it's a mix and match. It's like the left side of the brain versus the right side of the brain.
What about your
Um,
wife? Do you match each other with it, or is it like the opposites? Normally, opposites attract with this.
no, and I mean, we're pretty similar, to be honest, and we're both very much also temperamental people, which means
Hmm.
that there's a lot of I guess because I'm also from the Balkan, there's a lot of shouting involved and a lot of mess and sometimes throwing plates. And at the same time, it's also very loving,
Hmm.
and very how do you say it? Sometimes it works like perfect, like it's easy. It's like a 5-second idea, and we can continue. But when there are creative differences and we're both very stubborn and think our idea is better, then we can we we can have our debate. Yeah.
Collaboration's always really hard when it's someone that you spend so much time with.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not a big collaborator in general, so it was very scary, to be honest, because it's also a career that you built yourself, and she built her own career, and then you're gonna work together. But how is that gonna work out? At the same time, I mean, I cannot imagine sharing my life with someone else. It's great that you have a partner that is into the same stuff that you are, and you can both create stuff and elevate each other to a next level, and do a lot of fun things. And it's someone that is actually that can understand you like 100%, because she's an artist as well, so she knows. um, it doesn't surprise her when you're painting at 1 a.m. at night. And it's not like, hey, come watch a movie, because she's probably
Yeah,
editing photos or anything,
you
you
get
know?
it. Yeah, you both get
Yeah.
it. That's
So,
amazing. What projects do you have coming up soon, or where are you currently exhibiting?
um, I just finished no, wait, I'm still currently exhibiting at Unknown Gallery in
Mhm.
Amsterdam, up in the northern part. I do have one project that is going to be announced on Monday, so I cannot say what the project is about, but
I'm looking
it,
forward to
it
it. I'm looking forward to finding out.
yeah, I mean, I always think it's nerve-wracking because last time the event had 125,000 people. So I'm always scared that if that amount is bigger, then that means that all these people might see my artwork, and then I feel like a bit of pressure to at least show something good. Uh,
If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and click the bell notification. Thank you.